Stop buying bad CPU and GPU combos. Let's get you the best CPU and GPU combo in 2026. Welcome back to PC Builder. I'm Jason. In 2026, with graphics card and RAM markets so challenging, it has never been more important to get the best CPU and GPU combo for gaming PC builds. But figuring out the best CPU for gaming and the best GPU for gaming by themselves, that's hard enough. Putting it together for the best CPU and GPU combo, it's even harder. So today we'll cover everything you need to know and give you specific product recommendations at every budget level to get you the best CPU and GPU combo for gaming in 2026. If you get value out of this video, please give it a like, so it really helps out the channel. Of course, subscribe for more cool PC content. Let's jump into it. All right, let's start off with that RAM pricing. Now, due to insane AI data center expansion, RAM prices, they are significantly higher than last year. Now, at the time of filming, a 32GB kit of DDR5 RAM goes for $350 to $370, while a 16GB kit of DDR5 RAM goes for between $200 and $250. DDR4 RAM, it's a bit cheaper, with a 16GB kit going for between $120 and $150, and a 32GB kit going for between $220 and $250. This is why it's even more important than ever not to overspend on the CPU platform at the expense of your graphics card in order to get the best FPS performance. Now, one way to help with this is RAM combo deals that offer significant discounts. Newegg in the US has a lot of these for both DDR4 and DDR5, many of which are quite good, and I'm going to link those down in the video description for you to check out. For example, this 1440p gaming PC build with an RX 9070 GPU and Ryzen 7600X CPU is $1,468, but with a Newegg combo, it's $130 less and upgrades the cooler to a 240mm AIO and adds RGB to the RAM. Micro Center is a local retailer in the US that also offers these combos, but they're in-store only, so definitely check that out if you have a store near you. Outside the US, you should check with your local electronics retailers for these same kinds of combos. The number one thing that you need to understand to get the best CPU and GPU combo in 2026, it's bottlenecking. Now, this means that one of our components is limiting our performance. Now, when this happens, the only way to get more performance is to upgrade that component. For a gaming PC build, the typical bottleneck is the CPU versus the GPU. If your CPU cannot keep up with your graphics card, then increasing the speed of the CPU will give you more FPS. But if your GPU is your bottleneck, then you just got to get a faster GPU to increase your FPS performance. Your CPU is more likely to bottleneck when we're pushing huge amounts of frames, and our GPU is usually the bottleneck when we turn up the resolution from 1080p to 1440p to 4K, including if our GPU doesn't have enough VRAM to run the latest AAA titles at higher ultra details. Of course, this is one area people get totally wrong, and they buy a bad CPU and GPU combo. Now, no matter what, our system is always going to have a bottleneck. It's our job as PC builders. We've got to understand how to maximize our PC build performance, whether that's in gaming, streaming, video editing, or heavy multi-threaded workloads. Once we figure that out, we want to spend most of our budget on that component that's bottlenecking our overall performance. For a gaming PC build in 2026, we want to maximize our FPS performance for our budget. Especially with higher RAM costs right now, the best thing you can do is get the fastest graphics card that you can afford, then just get a CPU platform that does not overly bottleneck your GPU. The less you have to spend, the more important it is to get the best CPU and GPU balance. Of course, the term budget, it's very important here, because obviously if you had unlimited money, you'd just get the fastest CPU, GPU, SSD, everything else. We'd spend about $5,000 to $10,000 or even more on the fastest gaming PC possible on Earth. But most of you out there have this thing called a budget, so we're gonna give you the most value for your money. Now let me give you an example here. Let's say we want to build a 1440p gaming PC. We choose a Ryzen 7600X CPU and an RX 9070 16GB GPU. But then we decide to increase our budget another $200. Well, where should we spend that to maximize our performance? We could upgrade the CPU to like a Ryzen 9700X. It's only about 3 to 5% faster on average at 1440p with an RX 9070 GPU. So we spent $200 for maybe 5% more FPS, but if instead we use that $200 and went up to an RX 9070 XT, that'd give us 12 to 15% more FPS at 1440p. Now, especially if you play very graphic intensive games like Cyberpunk 2077 or Black Myth Wukong. And remember that as we go up in resolution from like 1080p to 1440p to 4K, that decreases the load on our CPU, but it increases the load on our GPU. Of course, getting enough VRAM on your graphics card to avoid FPS bottlenecks, that's also very important in 2026. While 12 gigabytes of VRAM, it's still enough for most 1440p gaming, turning on upscaling like DLSS or FSR does use more VRAM, and turning on heavy ray tracing, that uses even more VRAM. Thus going from a graphics card like an RX 5070 12GB GPU up to an RX 9070 XT 16GB GPU or RTX 5070 Ti 16GB, that can have added benefits to consider. This is especially true for more budget builders considering an 8GB graphics card, or even moving to 10 or 12GB that might allow them to improve their 1440p, even 1080p gameplay experience by going to high or ultra settings. But what about those of you who want to do more than just game on your PC? Well, a regular gaming PC, believe it or not, can handle most non-professional streaming, video editing, or Photoshop tasks pretty easily. But if you do this for a living 40 hours a week and you make money from it, you probably should consider the system requirements for the applications that you use. Some applications like Adobe Premiere for video editing, they can benefit from more CPU cores, but they also need the GPU for rendering and exporting. So oversizing your CPU at the expense of your GPU, it might actually hurt your video editing performance. So check those application requirements carefully. All right, let's jump into our recommendations for best CPU and GPU combo for gaming in 2026. We're gonna go through both AMD Ryzen and Intel platforms. Now, everything is linked down in the video description along with resources like our build guide list for the most popular CPUs, our how to build a PC playlist with how-to and buying guides, and of course, our regular CPU and GPU market update videos for the latest on pricing and availability. I've also got those new combo deals linked down there as well. Right now, the CPUs that I would consider, Ryzen 9000 and 7000 series CPUs and 5000 for budget builds. On the Intel side, we're gonna look at Intel Core Ultra 200 CPUs and 13th and 14th gen unlock parts for mid-range builds, and 12th gen Intel CPUs for budget builds as well. Starting off at the ultra budget level, you can build a gaming PC right now for just under $800 with all new parts. To maximize our FPS, we want to get the fastest GPU we can afford, then just get the cheapest CPU platform that's not going to bottleneck our GPU. Right now, the best option are the Ryzen 5500 for around $90 US, or any of the 12th, 13th, or 14th gen Intel i3 CPUs like the i3 1200F for about the same price. Both of these CPUs come with included stock coolers that are more than adequate. For the Ryzen CPU, we want a B450 or B550 motherboard for about $75, and B450 motherboards are fine as the Ryzen 5500 is locked to PCIe Gen 3. For the Intel i3 CPUs, we want a budget B660 or B760 motherboard that uses DDR4 RAM. We're going to use 16GB DDR4 kits, either 3200CL16 or 3600CL18. Right now, that costs about $135 US. But check for combo deals because I'm seeing some good ones with 32GB kits right now for less than the 16GB kit costs. The total cost of these platforms comes to between $300 and $335. For our ultra budget GPU combo, we really don't have a minimum, but I would probably avoid any graphics card in 2026 that has less than 8GB of VRAM. At the time of filming, Intel dominates the budget graphics card new market with the older but still good Arc A580 and A750 for under $200, or the current B570 10GB for around $240. AMD's lowest end offering is the RX 6600, and NVIDIA's lowest end 8GB GPU is the RTX 3050 8GB. This budget platform really starts to hit a wall around the RX 9060 XT 16GB, RTX 5060 Ti 16GB, or the Arc B580 12GB GPU. And at that point, I'd want to consider upping the CPU if I could. Moving over to the budget category, we're still looking at DDR4 CPUs with a bit more power like the Ryzen 5600 variants, including the Ryzen 5600, 5600X, 5600T, 5600XT, all which perform similarly and they all come with a stock cooler. You can also consider the Ryzen 5800 XT. I've seen a couple Newegg combos with it which are quite good and also includes a cooler. We're going to pair this with a roughly $90 B550 motherboard, which unlocks PCIe Gen 4 speed, unlike the B450 motherboards. Boards like the MSI Pro B550M-VC Wi-Fi or the ASRock B550M Pro RS, those are great values. But check our Best Ryzen Motherboard 2026 video for even more options. On the Intel side, we can consider the i5 12400, 13400, or 14400. Usually F variants are cheaper like the i5 14400F. I'd go with the cheapest one as there just isn't much gaming performance difference and we're going to use the included stock coolers. You can also consider the i5 12600K with slightly better performance, but you will need to buy at least a budget tower air cooler for it. We pair this with a B660 or B760 motherboard that uses DDR4 RAM for about $110, like the Asus B760M AYW Wi-Fi. Though LGA 1700 motherboards, they're pretty thin stock. We are using a 16GB kit of DDR4 3200CL16 or 3600CL18 for about $135, and the total for those platforms is $375 to $405, which is between $75 and $105 more than the previous tier. For our GPU, we want to move above the most basic graphics cards, take advantage of that additional money that we just spent on our CPU platform. For between $230 and $300, you can pick up the minimum GPU of an RX 9060 XT 8GB, RTX 5050 8GB, or Intel Arc B570 10GB. Now, every month we go through the GPU market and identify the best value GPUs in every budget level, so check that out for the current recommendations. While these CPUs do better than the previous tier at the maximum GPU, I still recommend capping out at a Radeon RX 9060 XT 16GB, NVIDIA RTX 5060 Ti 16GB, or Intel Arc B580 12GB GPU. Alright, let's jump in the mid-range gaming CPUs with AMD's Ryzen AM5 platform CPUs like the Ryzen 7500F, 7600, 7600X, and 9600X, all priced between $160 and $185 right now. These are very popular in RAM combo deals, so check those links in the video description, see what's available as they are all very close in performance for most mid-range and even upper mid-range GPUs. And we've got build guides for both the 7600X and 9600X on the channel, which are under our PC build guides playlist, linked down in the video description. Now, I recommend a value-oriented B650, B650E, or B850 motherboard for as cheap as $100, like the ASRock B650M Pro RS, or possibly pick up a more mid-range motherboard like the Pro B850M-A or the very excellent MSI Pro B850M-A for $149. We've got lots of other options in our Best Ryzen Motherboard 2026 video, so check that out as well. These CPUs are incredibly easy to cool and really only need a budget tower air cooler for about $20, like the recently discounted id Cooling SE214XT, Cooler Master Hyper 212 series, or Thermalright Assassin 120 SE, or similar budget tower air cooler. On the Intel side, we've got the i5-14600K, which is low stock and pricing is really volatile, but it can be used with cheaper DDR4 RAM, though it does lose about 10% performance if you do so, putting it behind the Ryzen AM5 CPUs. If you're wondering about the Intel Core Ultra 5 245K, just isn't very good at gaming, so it isn't really worth it. While the Ryzen AM5 CPUs are all going to be upgradable in the future, there is no future CPUs launching for Intel's older LGA 1700 platform. Now, if you do go Intel B660, B760, Z690, or Z790 DDR5 motherboards, those are all fine, but you will want a dual tower air cooler like the id Cooling A620 Pro SE, or Thermalright Peerless Assassin, or Phantom Spirit. We're going to use a 16GB DDR5 RAM kit. Anything DDR5 5600 CL40 or faster is fine. Personally, I'd go cheap here, but if you want a 32GB kit, it's about another $100 total. Total platform price here, $575 to $624, which is $200 to $249 more than the previous tier. For a mid-range GPU combo, the CPUs that we have, they're pretty strong performers, but you only see that when you're using a mid-range or faster GPU. I'd look at a minimum of an RX 9060 XT 16GB, RTX 5060 Ti 16GB, or Arc B580 12GB GPU. These CPUs are great performers for the price overall, and in particular, I think they pair really well with those mid-range to upper-end 1440p graphics cards like the RX 9070 16GB and RX 9070 XT 16GB, as well as the RTX 5070 12GB and RTX 5070 Ti 16GB graphics cards. You can of course push this up to an RTX 5080. At that point, I definitely think it's time to move on to a higher performing gaming CPU, particularly if you are playing a lot of competitive titles like Battlefield 6 or CS2. Jumping up to our upper mid-range CPU and GPU combos, we now have a new option in 2026 with the Ryzen 7500X3D now in the US market. This is a 6-core CPU with 3D V-Cache that is much faster in gaming than the Ryzen 7 non-X3D CPUs like this 9700X and 7700X. And it's much faster than the Ultra 7 265K, which is our current Intel option, though we do expect some refreshed Intel Core Ultra 200 CPUs coming very soon. Like other X3D CPUs, the 7500 X3D just doesn't care very much about RAM speed because there's a huge amount of V-Cache, so that might even let us save some money on our RAM purchase. The only drawback here is the 7500 X3D is currently low stock, so fingers crossed that AMD keeps supplying it to the US market. The other CPU options give us more cores and more productivity or creator power, but less gaming performance with higher end graphics cards like a 5070 Ti or 9070 XT. Now for either Ryzen build, we're using a similar B650, B650E, or B850 motherboard that we used in the previous CPU tier, but we're upping the minimum cooler to a dual tower air cooler like the id Cooling A620 Pro SE, or Thermalright Peerless Assassin or Phantom Spirit. Now liquid coolers are also great for these CPUs. For the Core Ultra 265K, I'm recommending a good quality 360mm AIO cooler and a B860 or Z890 motherboard. For both, we have the same 16GB kit of DDR5 5600 CL40 or faster RAM. These come out between $665 and $744 total, which is between $90 to $169 more than the previous tier. For our GPU combo, I'd look to a minimum of an RX 9070 16GB or RTX 5070 12GB GPU. You do not want to go to a lesser GPU here, and honestly, this is the tier that I am most worried about people oversizing their CPU at the expense of their GPU. You can take these combos all the way up to an RX 9070 XT and beyond to the RTX 5080, possibly an RTX 5090. Of course, we hit a lot of bottleneck with almost any gaming CPU that is not a Ryzen 9000 series X3D CPU with the 5090, so at that point, we really do want to move up in terms of our CPU performance to the ultimate tier. But in particular, I think the RX 9070 XT is a great graphics card for this one. Time to jump up to the top tier of gaming CPUs in 2026. And in 2026, the ultimate gaming CPU, it is now the Ryzen 9850X3D. Although the Ryzen 9800X3D, it's only 3% slower with an RTX 5090 at 1080p, so if you do find a discount, don't hesitate to grab one. I've also included the Ryzen 9950X3D for those of you who are professional creators or production pros who also want maximum gaming performance. Just know there's no gaming performance difference between the 9950X3D and the 9800X3D CPUs. We've seen rumors of a new 16-core dual X3D CPU, which is likely going to be the Ryzen 9950X3D 2, and you can consider that if it launches. Coming in at just behind the 9800X3D is the Ryzen 7800X3D, which saw a huge price drop in the middle of 2025, and is plenty for most mid-range GPUs. At this performance tier, Intel, they just don't have anything competitive. That is at least until they launch their Nova Lake X3D CPUs in late 2026 or early 2027. The Ryzen 9850X3D or Ryzen 9800X3D are going to offer at least 10 to 15% better gaming performance with an RTX 5090 at 1440p ultra detail settings over previous tier non-X3D CPUs. Even more if using lowered settings in competitive games. And the Ryzen 7800X3D, it's not far behind. We've got build guides for all these CPUs in the PC parts and build video playlist linked below. We're going to pair our Ryzen 9850X3D, 9800X3D, or 7800X3D CPU with a B650E, B850, or X870 or X870E motherboard for the PCIe Gen 5 GPU slot, just in case it is ever relevant. So a motherboard like the Gigabyte B850 Eagle for $149 or a ASUS B650E Plus for about $190. If you're using the 9950X3D, just make sure you get a higher end motherboard with good VRMs for the 16-core CPU. There are tons of other options from the B850 Tomahawk Wi-Fi and ASUS B850 TUF for around $200, and good quality X870 production-oriented motherboards begin around $200 as well. And we cover all these in our Best Ryzen Motherboard 2026 video, including higher-end motherboards for more premium builds. We want any of the dual tower air coolers we listed before for the 9800X3D or 7800X3D. My recommendation for the 9950X3D, go for a high-performance liquid cooler for around $100, like the 360mm Arctic Liquid Freezer 3 Pro or Montech Hyperflow 360. For RAM, X3D CPUs just don't care very much about RAM speed, so I'd look to get any DDR5 5600 CL40 or faster kits, but I am seeing DDR5 6000 CL30 kits almost the same price. The 7800 X3D upgrade is an additional $175 over the previous tier, with the 9800 X3D upgrade costing $235 more, and the 9950 X3D coming in at a whopping $530 more than the previous tier. For our GPU combos, for a minimum, I would recommend the Radeon RX 9070 16GB or RTX 5070 12GB. That's primarily for the Ryzen 7800 X3D. For the Ryzen 9800 X3D, I'd recommend a minimum of an RTX 5070 Ti 16GB or RX 9070 XT 16GB. Either of these CPUs will pair really well with an RTX 5080 or 5090, though if I'm spending $2,500 to $3,000 on my GPU, I'm likely going to spend that extra $100 and get the Ryzen 9850 X3D. Congratulations, you now own one of the fastest gaming PCs on planet Earth. We've linked all the CPU and GPU combos mentioned in this video down in the video description. Check out those links for current pricing and availability in your region. Check out our build guides for specific CPUs in the PC build guide video playlist, and all of our other how-to videos like Best RAM for Gaming 2026, Best Ryzen Motherboard 2026, and of course, how to build a PC in our How to Build a PC 2026 playlist. If you got value out of this video, please take a moment, give it a like, of course subscribe, and click the bell icon. That way you get notified when we release cool PC content. And we'll catch you on the next one.